This was back when I was 18, right before I moved out for college. I was living with my brother and my mother. We live out in the country a little ways, so we're about 13 miles from the nearest town. And if you know anything about country living, it's that you have property, land, privacy, no cell service, and in our case, a very long driveway, which was a total pain in the butt to bring trash cans down to at the end of every week. At the time, my mother only had a crappy little 2002 Ford Focus that had severe alternator problems, meaning the car would just randomly decide to die whenever it wanted to, shutting off entirely. Sometimes you can just turn the key immediately and restart the engine. Other times you would have to wait 30 seconds, if not more. There wasn't a problem with the engine overheating. There was just something wrong with the connectivity, I believe. I don't think we ever truly found out what the exact issue was, other than the alternator going whack. My mother was never fully capable of properly saving enough money to get it taken care of, so it's a problem she just dealt with, and it severely endangered me, my brother, and her. There were times this happened on the highway, and she'd have to pull over with the remaining car momentum, and we considered ourselves very lucky. Sarcastically, she was far too stubborn to ever invest in AAA, or any sort of roadside service that would have actually helped us. No, her solutions were to sit there and wait for the damn thing to come back on. If I don't give you this backstory, well, then the sighting might not make any sense. So I'll finish giving you some more backstory details before I tell you the actual encounter. So at the end of our driveway, it curves onto a main highway. Beyond that highway is all thick forest that goes on for miles. If you go down the road in either direction from our driveway, about a mile each way, you'll hit a person's house, and all around our house is just empty farmland. So there's virtually nothing, nobody for at least a mile. And with virtually zero cell service, it makes for a fun time, especially being a teenager. Now, I'll set the story up for you. My mother used to have frequent doctor visits because of her continuous medical conditions. She had an assortment of ailments that I think were brought on by part of her hypochondria, so I don't know what was real and what wasn't. Anyway, I remember it was either late fall or early winter, because it didn't get light out till late in the morning, like 7:30, 8 o'clock, something like that, and she had a very early doctor's appointment this morning. Maybe it was like 7 in the morning. I don't remember exactly. I think I was busy getting ready for school. I can remember the sun just starting to come up. At the time, there wasn't any snow or ice on the road or driveway, which meant clear driving conditions, so my mom hops in the car and heads down the driveway. She gets to the very end of the driveway and is about to turn onto the highway when the car dies, shuts off completely, as my mom is swearing, smacking the dashboard and trying to get the thing back on, turning the key ignition multiple times. She looks up and sees a face staring at her through the trees directly across the highway. She described it as a big dog face, or coyote looking. She felt immediate fear, and not because she didn't know what this thing was, but because it was watching her like a person would, staring into her soul. She said that she then got to see a better look at it, and described it as a very overly large coyote walking on its hind legs. It appeared to be moving through the trees to get a better look at her. She starts panicking, trying to get the car to start, but it's just not budging. She's paying half attention to the car, half attention looking up in the trees, when she notices that she can't see it anymore, fearing that it might be coming out towards her, or getting ready to. She says screw it, and just gets out of the car and walks all the way back up the driveway toward the house. Why do I remember this so well? Because it's not every day that you see a 53-year-old woman running up the driveway, screaming for help. My brother and I, who at the time are 18 and 15, come running out of the house, asking her, "Mom, what's going on? What happened?" And she tells us exactly what I just told you. She gave us an earful. She kept saying, "It's still down there, it's still down there, it's gonna come after me." My brother and I exchanged glances, and we look back at Mom, thinking she's lost it. But my brother steps forward and decides to humor her. Clearly he doesn't believe her, even though her story does seem somewhat convincing. Him and I both walk down there together and check everything out. We couldn't get her car to start, so we eventually called a close friend who came by and somehow got it working. My brother walked over to the other side of the street, where the thick woods were, took a look around, and didn't see anything. I just remember him saying, "Man, Mom is such a crackpot, probably high on her meds again, for all we know." I don't know. I felt differently about it. Mom's reaction and the way she was acting just seemed genuine. It didn't seem forced, and why would she make it up? I'm not saying she didn't hallucinate, but there doesn't seem to be any reason that she would leave her car when it's 30 degrees out, walk all the way back up the driveway, and scream for help from her 2 teenage sons. She was taking a few medications, but this wasn't like her. She never hallucinated before, or had any issues seeing things that weren't there. I can't vouch for what she saw, but either way it really spooked her. And once we finally got the car back up and running, I thanked my friend. He went on his way, and my mother was very apprehensive to get the car and drive it back up the driveway, so I did it for her. I don't really go hunting or anything too extravagant out here, and I've never really been the outdoorsy manly type. Me and my brother just kind of keep to ourselves, play video games, be quiet, good, complacent young kids. This isn't something that I've spent a whole lot of time thinking about, but I did figure it would make for an interesting story. As far as what my mother actually saw that morning, I'm not too sure. The way I see it, there's really only 2 options here. The first is that she probably really did see a big coyote, but I doubt it was acting the way she made it out to be. Standing on its hind legs, nefariously looking at her, observing every move she made. I'm not an animal expert, but I think coyotes are kind of loners anyway. But it was out in the forest, and we were kind of out in the backcountry, so it really wouldn't surprise me much. Now the second option is that she actually did see something that resembled a coyote, somewhat closely, enough to draw that comparison. But the few distinctions she made was that, again, it was on its hind legs, and it was staring at her, watching her in her car. And this is my own critical thinking, and I asked her myself, like when I was asking her what the face looked like when she said it looked dog-like. I said, "Mom, what do you mean dog-like? All dogs have a dog face." That isn't very descriptive. Her best way to explain it was that it looked kind of like a coyote, but it was more of its own thing. She said it was much bigger and looked a little different. Now that I'm thinking about it, when she had mentioned it being on its hind legs and it being so large, it could have been easy to really entertain the whole werewolf idea, but none of us, neither me, my brother, or my mother ever mentioned that at all. I don't believe werewolves exist, but I do believe my mother saw something. Now again, whether it was a mistaken identity of just a really large singular coyote, possibly, but I just can't help reiterate that she's seen coyotes before, even larger ones. There were plenty of deer out where we lived, and so it was very common to find carcasses all over the place. To say they ate good is an understatement. The area in the fall time was always heavily populated by hunters, so I take it the getting was good, and there would always be tons and tons of deer around. I didn't know of any nearby water sources off the top of my head, although there was a lake not too far away, and I think a pond not too far from our house. But I didn't really spend too much time exploring. I stayed inside with my brother, like I already told you. The only other big recreational outdoor activity I can think of was trout fishing, but I couldn't tell you where. I just know it was in the general area of where I lived, because a lot of people talked about it. So, without dragging this longer into something that it doesn't need to be, what is your take on it? Is this just a case of mistaken identity, or was there really something there, an unknown creature, watching my mother in the car? I'm a very skeptical person by nature, and so is my brother. And this is always a story that I've really wanted to bring the attention to of multiple people who would believe in this realm of reality. So I'm hoping that I am fortunate enough to have you read my story to your viewers. It would be an honor. And if that is the case, I would love for them to comment their opinion on what exactly they think my mother saw based on the descriptions given by her. Maybe I'm just being far too skeptical, and she really did see something. After all, science teaches us that we could be wrong. If we are not willing to learn and change our minds based on new information and evidence given, then there's no point in sticking with the old ways.